Have you ever had a prospect that was on track and then after the presentation, they just seemed to get squirrely? Maybe you never even heard back from them again, regardless of all of that follow-up that you did. This is an all too common problem for salespeople. And a lot of the time, it's caused by a sales presentation that simply missed the mark. In fact, the data suggests that over 75% of sales presentations lead prospects to feel that the salesperson just didn't get it. Yet, this is a problem that is so easily avoided by making a few small tweaks to your selling approach. In this video, I'm going to show you 9 quick sales presentation tips all salespeople must know. Check it out. Number 1, it must come after a thorough discovery. I cannot tell you how frustrating I find it when a sales manager or a salesperson says something like, we really need to work on our pitch. I always come back to this idea of the fact that we don't need to be worrying about our pitch, because a pitch implies that we're actually presenting before we've done a very thorough discovery, before we've asked a lot of questions to find out really what's going on in the eyes and in the world of this prospect. Pitching is this old school idea where we think to ourselves, you know what, I am going to convince this person with a really compelling presentation that they need to do business with me. And the reality is that we don't need to be persuasive or convincing at all. What we need to do is be really good at that discovery phase of the sale where we're asking a lot of questions to find out exactly whether this particular prospect is A, a good fit, B, has some challenges and concerns that you could really solve, and lastly, that they're the right person, that they have the budget, all of those things that we need to know up front before we're getting into a presentation. Because the reality is that most prospects complain that salespeople's presentation are missing the mark. And the reason for that is because the salesperson obviously didn't do a good enough job up front to find out what the prospect really need, what they really cared about, and what they were really concerned about. So make sure that your sales presentations come after a thorough discovery. Number 2, only present the solutions to their challenges. This one, to me, when I say it out loud, I think, geez, are people going to think that this is so obvious? And maybe you're listening and you're saying, you know what, that is so obvious. But I promise you, we've all in the past couple of months been at least one time we were in a presentation situation where we wanted to present more than the prospect really cared about. And what does the prospect care most about? Solving their challenges. So when you are presenting features or some benefits or some ideas that go outside of the challenges that the prospect is facing, what we're really doing is shooting ourselves in the foot. Because prospects don't care about that stuff. I mean, think of the last time you bought a car and you had some cheesy, car sales guy who's saying, well, we've got this amazing Sirius XM radio. And you're thinking to yourself, what are you talking about? I'm going to use my iPod or my iPhone the whole time when I'm using this car. I'm not going to use the Sirius XM radio. That's an example of someone presenting a solution that has nothing to do with what the prospect cares about. So only present solutions to your prospect's challenges. Number 3, don't present one last thing. This is, again, it fits in alignment with what we just talked about, but it's so important. One of my rules for many years has always been keep your presentation as short as possible. And this idea of presenting one last thing is really devastating to salespeople. Take, for example, let's say you were in a selling situation, and you've probably been in this situation before where you basically have them closed, right? They're ready to go, and they're all excited, and you can tell they're really engaged with the conversation. And then you say, but let me show you one last thing that we can do. And after doing that, they're suddenly like, we really don't need that. That's actually outside of what we're really focused on. And then at that point, you can tell you've just lost them a little bit. So you're probably nodding your head and you're saying, yeah, I've done that before. Don't ever let that happen again. What caused that was this idea that we had to present that one last thing. We as salespeople get all excited about all of the features and all of the benefits of what we do. But the reality is that your prospects only care about the stuff that you do that relates directly to them, that solves their challenges. So don't ever get caught up in presenting that one last thing. Use case studies. The case study presentation is really one of my favorite contributions that I feel like I've made to the sales community. A couple of pieces that drove this concept. First is that most presentations are pretty dry, and so they're not holding prospects' attention because they're very focused on specific features or specific benefits. And so they're not really telling a story. So on the one hand, they're a little on the boring side. And then on the other hand, we're missing out on this whole opportunity to show user examples of how we've helped other people in the past, other past clients. And so what I challenge you to think about is how can you be presenting in a way that is showing the prospect how you've solved another similar type of prospect's problems by using a case study. And a case study is really simple, right? A case study is basically just an example of how you've helped another prospect do what this particular prospect is looking to do. And when you do that, you're going to combine a really powerful idea of both showing that example, showing those results, engaging them in something that's really powerful and meaningful, and at the same time, also showing them that, hey, this has worked on other people. What you'll find is that these case study presentations are so much more engaging than just the typical run-of-the-mill presentation. Number 5, the 60-second rule. Now you're probably thinking, what the heck is the 60-second rule? The 60-second rule is simply this. You should never be presenting to the point where you're speaking without interruption for more than 60 seconds. Some really powerful data has recently come out from one of my favorite companies, Gong.io, where what they discovered is that top salespeople's conversations versus average and bottom performing salespeople's conversations look quite different. And one of the biggest differences is that top performing salespeople have a lot more back and forth during that presentation than a bottom or even average performing salesperson who's typically just pitching and talking the whole time. So what we want to do is make sure that we're never going for more than about 60 seconds in a presentation without engaging the prospect back into the conversation, making sure that they're on board, making sure that you're answering their questions, making sure that they're really engaged, and never going for more than 60 seconds. In fact, they found that basically no presentations that turned into closed sales ever had situations where the salesperson was talking for more than about a minute and a half. Pretty powerful stuff. Keep your presentations to the point where every 60 seconds at least you're engaging the prospect back into the conversation. Number 6, feedback loops. Now you're thinking to yourself, what's a feedback loop? Well, a feedback loop is basically the answer, the solution to the 60-second rule. It's the way that you can always keep prospects engaged in your presentation. So that way throughout the whole conversation, they're just nodding their head and they're like, yeah. Or if you go off track, they're gonna be like, that doesn't really make sense to me. So a feedback loop is really simple. It's just a simple question that you're going to ask during the presentation that's going to bring them back in. Questions like, does that make sense? Or is that cool? Or are we really on the same page at this point? Little simple questions that are going to prompt the prospect to be like, yeah, that does make sense. And if you do it in the right way, you can really do this very frequently. When I'm presenting to a prospect, I am constantly using feedback loops to suck people back in and using these little simple questions that they don't even hear, they don't even notice, but it prompts them to say, yeah, that does make sense. The other really powerful benefit to using a feedback loop is that when you go off track, you're going to know right away because they're going to typically push back and say, actually, I'm not sure if that does make total sense. And now you're getting really valuable information that you can then use to go back on track. Does that make sense? Number 7, if you lose them, stop. This is one of those places where really competitive people can get ourselves into trouble. You're probably in sales because in some way you're highly competitive. And what I find is that really competitive salespeople can sometimes, when they feel like they're losing the sale or they're losing an opportunity, what they start to do is push more. They try to get more persuasive. They step on the gas even more to try to suck that prospect back in. But what's happening is they're actually losing the sale just that much more because they're applying more pressure, and the prospect as a result is actually likely to push back. So if you start to lose a prospect in a presentation situation, just stop. Just stop. And it's really simple. Your gut is going to tell you if you're losing it. So I'm not going to explain how you know if you're losing them, but you're typically going to notice you're losing eye contact. Maybe they're not engaged as much. They're not nodding their head. They're not responding to your feedback loops as well, whatever it is. But if you start to feel like you're losing them, what I recommend you say is something like this. You know what, George? I'm starting to get the sense that maybe we're off track here. Have I missed something? And one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to say, yes, I do feel like maybe we are off track, and here's how we got off track. The other is they're going to say, no, sorry, I'm sorry, I was distracted. I just got an email from someone about something else. And now you can just play that out and pull it back on track. But the second you start to lose them, stop, hit the brakes, and take a deep breath and ask them if we are off track. What you're going to find is that it either is off track or it's not. And either way, you really, really, really want to know. Number 8, keep it as short as possible. Now, I already mentioned this before, but I can't say it enough times. Keeping the presentation as short as possible is only ever going to serve you. What often happens is that we as salespeople get really excited about what we're talking about. And the problem is that very rarely is the prospect ever as excited about what we're talking about as we are. So we tend to go on for longer in the presentation phase than we need to. Keeping that presentation as short and concise as possible is only going to serve us. Once it starts to get long and meandering and going off track, we're going to lose far more sales. Because that means that we're starting to not just present to the challenges that they have, but we're also throwing in those other benefits, those other features, or that one last thing. And those little one last things are almost like little landmines that we're setting for ourselves, and we're likely to fall off track and lose the sale. So keep the presentation as short as possible. Number 9, clear and scheduled next steps. You know, I feel like I talk about clear and scheduled next steps a lot. And that's for a reason, because you literally can't focus on clear and scheduled next steps enough. If your presentations are ending with anything other than a very, very clear and scheduled next step, you're in trouble. You know, the idea of the one-call close is kind of an old school idea. I mean, typically salespeople are selling far more complex and high-end products or services that are going to require multiple steps. And as a result of those multiple steps, sales are getting lost because there isn't that clear and scheduled next step. So after your presentation, assuming you're really on the same page, chances are there's going to be some kind of a next step before you're ultimately really closing it. You know, in some cases, you are going to be closing that sale and you're going to be getting them to sign on the dotted line. That's great. But in a lot of cases, that's not going to happen. And in those cases, we need to make sure that we have those scheduled next steps. That means that a calendar invite is going out to the prospect. And we're saying something like, you know what, George, do you have your calendar out? Let's schedule the next step where we can discuss after you've had a chance to talk this over with your team. And we can talk about what next steps might look like, if that even makes sense. And they're almost always going to say, sure, let's get on the calendar. And now you're on their calendar and you're moving the process along. What you always want to avoid, of course, is, hey, George, how about I call you on Wednesday of next week to follow up on this? They're always going to say yes, but they're not often going to pick up the phone. And it's not because they're hiding from you. It's because they're really busy. And now the sale is starting to slide off track. So there are 9 quick sales presentation tips all salespeople must know. I want to hear from you. Which of these ideas did you find most useful? Be sure to share below in the comments section to get involved in the conversation. And if you enjoyed this video, then I have an awesome free ebook on 25 tips to crush your sales goals. Just click right here to get it instantly. Seriously, just click right here. Also, if you got some value, please like this video below on YouTube and be sure to subscribe to my channel by clicking right here, my little face, to get access to a new video just like this one each and every week.